If you had to guess where most of the world's billionaires live, you'd probably name the obvious places: New York, London, maybe Dubai. And yes, those cities do have billionaires, but the real geography of global wealth is far stranger than that, because some of the richest people on Earth live in places that look almost completely ordinary on a map. Small islands, quiet suburbs, cities you've probably never heard of. And when you map where billionaires actually live, a very clear pattern appears. A pattern that reveals something surprising. The richest people in the world don't choose locations randomly. They cluster in very specific geographic ecosystems. And once you understand those ecosystems, you can almost predict where the next billionaire capital will appear. But first, we need to answer a simple question. Where are they actually living right now? Today, there are roughly 2,700 billionaires worldwide, according to global wealth estimates. But they are not evenly distributed across the planet. In fact, if we map their primary residences, we see an extreme concentration in just a few regions. The United States alone hosts around 1/3 of the world's billionaires. And within the US, the majority live in just a handful of metropolitan areas. The biggest one? New York City, with more billionaires than any other city on Earth, followed by places like San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Miami. But outside the United States, the map becomes even more interesting. Cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Mumbai, and Moscow also host large billionaire populations. Yet when you zoom out, something strange becomes visible. Because the richest people in the world are not simply choosing the biggest cities. They are choosing very specific types of places. Places that offer a combination of advantages almost no other locations can match. And once you see the pattern, it becomes impossible to unsee. Because if population size alone created billionaires, then cities like Tokyo or Jakarta would dominate the list. But they don't. Instead, some smaller cities produce vastly more wealth per person, which raises a fascinating question. Why do billionaires cluster in certain places while completely ignoring others? The answer begins with something surprisingly simple: financial gravity. Money attracts money, and nowhere is that more visible than in global financial hubs. Cities like New York, London, and Hong Kong function as the control centers of the world economy. They host stock exchanges, investment banks, hedge funds, venture capital firms, and legal networks that move trillions of dollars every day. For billionaires, proximity to these systems matters enormously, because wealth at that scale is rarely static. It's constantly being invested, managed, expanded, and protected. And doing that efficiently requires access to the world's most sophisticated financial infrastructure, which is why so many billionaires still maintain homes in places like Manhattan or London's Mayfair. Not necessarily because they love the city, but because it sits at the center of the financial universe. But finance alone doesn't explain everything, because some billionaire hotspots aren't traditional financial centers at all. In fact, one of the most powerful billionaire ecosystems on Earth was built around something completely different: technology. If we look at the San Francisco Bay Area, something remarkable becomes clear. This region has created an extraordinary number of billionaires relative to its population. And the reason lies in the geography of innovation. Silicon Valley is not just a place where technology companies exist, it's an ecosystem where ideas, capital, and talent collide. Venture capital firms fund startups. Startups attract engineers. Engineers build companies. And when those companies succeed, enormous wealth is created almost instantly. This is how places like Palo Alto, Menlo Park, and San Jose became some of the densest billionaire clusters on the planet. And this pattern isn't unique to California. Similar tech-driven wealth ecosystems are emerging in cities like Shenzhen, Hangzhou, and Bangalore. In these places, billionaires are not simply inheriting fortunes. They're building them in industries that scale globally. But here's where the geography of wealth becomes even stranger. Because many billionaires don't actually live where they built their companies. Instead, they move somewhere else entirely. Somewhere quieter, somewhere warmer, and often somewhere with dramatically lower taxes. This is where tax geography begins to shape the billionaire map. Certain locations have become magnets for the ultra-wealthy because they offer extremely favorable tax policies. Places like Monaco, for example, have no personal income tax, which means billionaires living there can legally retain far more of their wealth. Similarly, cities like Dubai and Singapore have positioned themselves as global wealth hubs with low taxes and strong financial privacy. And in recent years, even regions within countries have started competing for billionaire residents. One of the clearest examples is happening in the United States. Over the last decade, a growing number of billionaires have relocated from places like California and New York to states like Florida and Texas. And the reasons are surprisingly simple: lower taxes, less regulation, and often a much higher quality of life. But taxes alone don't explain the full picture either, because if they did, every billionaire would simply move to the lowest tax location on Earth, and they clearly don't. Instead, something else is shaping where the world's richest people choose to live, something much more human: lifestyle. At extreme levels of wealth, daily life begins to look very different. Privacy becomes valuable, security becomes important, and access to exclusive experiences becomes part of the equation, which is why many billionaires cluster in places that offer extraordinary living environments. Think about locations like Aspen, Lake Tahoe, or Palm Beach. These places are not financial capitals, they're lifestyle capitals. They offer luxury homes, beautiful natural surroundings, and communities filled with people who live similar lives. And over time, these places become self-reinforcing. Because once a critical mass of wealthy residents appears, more wealthy residents tend to follow. But perhaps the most fascinating part of the billionaire map isn't where wealth exists today, it's where it's beginning to appear next. Because history shows that new billionaire capitals can emerge surprisingly fast, sometimes in places no one expects. Take Shenzhen in China as an example. Just 40 years ago, Shenzhen was a small fishing town. Today, it's one of the most important technology manufacturing hubs on Earth, and that transformation has created a massive new class of billionaires. Or consider Austin, Texas. Once known primarily as a college town, Austin has become a rapidly growing technology hub, attracting startups, investors, and tech executives relocating from California. And as these ecosystems grow, they begin to generate the same conditions that created wealth in Silicon Valley decades earlier. Talent clusters, investment flows in, companies scale globally, and new billionaires appear. This is the hidden geography of wealth creation, which leads to a surprising realization. The billionaire map is not static, it's constantly shifting, and the cities that dominate today may not dominate tomorrow. Throughout history, global wealth has moved from place to place. In the early 20th century, many of the world's richest people lived in industrial cities like Detroit, Pittsburgh, or Manchester. Then financial centers took over, then technology hubs, and today, new digital industries are beginning to reshape the geography of wealth once again. Artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and advanced manufacturing are creating entirely new economic ecosystems. And wherever those ecosystems form, billionaires will likely follow. Which raises an interesting question for the future. If the geography of wealth keeps evolving, where will the next billionaire capitals emerge? Will they appear in established cities like London and New York, or in rapidly growing hubs like Austin, Dubai, or Singapore, or perhaps in places that today seem completely ordinary? Because history suggests that the next global wealth center often begins quietly, long before anyone notices what's happening. And that's exactly why studying the geography of wealth is so fascinating. Because billionaires are not just random individuals scattered across the planet. They are signals. Signals of where industries are growing, where capital is concentrating, and where the future economic centers of the world may appear. So when you look at the map of where billionaires live, you're not just looking at wealth, you're looking at the economic blueprint of the modern world. And if you enjoyed exploring that blueprint with me, I'd love to hear something from you. Which city do you think will produce the most billionaires over the next 20 years? Austin, Dubai, Singapore, or somewhere completely unexpected? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy geography, economics, and maps that reveal how the world actually works, consider subscribing, because there are a lot more hidden patterns on this planet we haven't explored yet. And trust me, some of them are even more surprising than this one.